So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our work. Did you know that almost every single cell in our body has a little biological clock? It keeps time. And these clocks are ancient. Bacteria have them. Um, Photosynthetic bacteria have them. Um, all plants have them. All animals have them. Indeed, these clocks have evolved with life as it evolved on Earth. And they are part of biology that evolved on a rotating Earth, such that as we anticipate the huge changes that happen between the day and night, including changes in the light-dark cycle, in the availability of food and escaping from predators, in the temperature changes that happen, life on Earth evolved with fundamental clocks within our bodies. And so clocks were first found in fruit flies that attack our bananas and fruits. And just 2 years ago, the Nobel Prize was given to figuring out the mechanism of these biological clocks. While we know a lot about how these clocks have evolved, we know very little about what they do to us as humans and how much they influence our physiology, our behavior, our connections to disease and health. So what we've done is started to make the link between clocks and human health and biology. So we've seen, it's known that people's own internal time can be different. So what we have is, we have people we know who are morning larks, who get up early in the morning, are ready to go, and perform best during the beginning, middle of the day, but are out by 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Whereas then there are some of us who are night owls, and we drag our feet getting up in the morning, and then are most active, alert later in the day. And this is not only our cognitive function, it's the same with many different physiological systems like our eating behaviors, our sort of our GI systems, our every single aspect of our behavior. We're either morning people or evening people. So we've taken advantage of people answering questions about in the population. About 500,000 people who've been asked if they're morning people or evening people, and we found 350 genes that determine whether or not you're a morning person or an evening person. And this is, so not only is it our schedules, our behavior, our social lives, but also our genetics that determines whether we're a morning person or not, which makes complete sense in the context of our evolutionary biology. So we found these genes encode some of the gears of the clock itself in our brain. Some of these are related to light inputs into our brain. Some of these are related to the outputs of behavior that may be related to brain function or different tissue-specific functions. The other thing we've been able to look at is that how does morningness or eveningness contribute to health? And what we find is that overall in our society, morningness is causal. I mean, it contributes causally to overall well-being of health. It gives you protection against depression and schizophrenia. And this is after we searched across 250 diseases in the adult populations that we had been looking at, that these were extremely robust findings. So that's initially what we see with this. a key lesson from our work is that people should, as much as possible, follow their internal biological clock. And because what we notice is that evening people who have greater risk for mental health problems, some of this is likely to be because they live in conflict with their environment, as our societies are really built for morning people in general. So this is something that needs to be addressed on a societal level as well. So that's about our internal clocks. And so what are you? Morning lark, night owl. And how do you live according to that? I'm personally a night owl. I've learned that I've got to live with that and not feel bad about it anymore. So I beat myself up less. So then, the other thing that we've been studying is sleep patterns, which you've heard a little bit about already. So while we spend a third of our lives asleep, we still understand very little about all the molecular processes that go on while we sleep. And while we're starting to understand a lot about the function of sleep, there's still a lot remaining to be understood. So the function is still quite elusive. It's thought to be either to conserve energy or reset our ability to learn during the day or whenever we're awake, or to clear metabolic waste from our brain and our bodies, or with immune functions as well. So there are many things to learn about sleep still. So we've been able to, so we know that sleep is likely to have a very key function. It's also evolutionary really conserved, and it actually has been observed as far back as jellyfish, which are about 600 million years apart from us. So again, it's very important. But how important is it for our health? How does it relate to human disease? So using these large-scale studies, we found many new genes that contribute to how much we sleep, how much sleep we seem to need, how sleepy we feel on a daily basis, if we have insomnia symptoms, or if we have good quality sleep. And together, we've got about 200, 300 new genes through our approach, which had never yielded more than a couple of genes before. So there's a lot of new genetic information that's helping us understand whether which particular processes are involved in sleep. Many of these genes seem to influence different aspects of wake-sleep regulation in the brain, and now we're ready to go back into model organisms and study these in more detail. Interestingly, for insomnia, we also find that not only is the brain region important, but muscle function, and there are specific genes to that disorder that are very different from the sleep-wake regulatory centers of the brain. So that's been a new finding that I think will be interesting, both for trying to find new therapeutics and also understanding the biology of sleep and disorders. Finally, we also looked at links between sleep patterns and diseases, and we find that insomnia increases risk of depression causally using genetics, which has been known from observational studies and from physician studies already. Also, insomnia actually has a very strong effect on a risk of heart attack. So it's actually, that was a bit of a surprise to us that it was such a strong effect, but genetics confirmed that that was so. So those have been key lessons from the genetics of sleep studies we've been doing. And the final little story, if I have a couple more minutes, is that the way that I stumbled upon studying sleep and circadian rhythms, which was really through our work on diabetes genetics. And so did you know, and I think it's common wisdom, that eating at night is bad for you. But did you know that it's actually worse for you if you have a specific genetic makeup? So this is really how I got into this field, because one of the things that we found when we were studying the genetics of diabetes was that gene related to melatonin, which is the hormone of darkness that sort of signals the absence of light, actually increases your risk of type 2 diabetes. And that's because if melatonin rises like 2 hours before you sleep, and if you eat during the time that's like 2 hours before your sleep, melatonin has a bad influence on your sugar and on your insulin, and can actually, if you happen to have a genetic variant that enhances melatonin function, as about half of us in this room do, it can be particularly bad and increase our risk of diabetes. And this is very relevant for shift workers or like people in Spain who eat very late at night. And actually we have two studies ongoing, one in shift workers in Boston and one in natural late night eaters in Spain, for whom we sort of set up early eating habits, and we see much improved glucose parameters. So that's sort of the journey of our research that I wanted to leave you with. So thank you for listening.